What's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, we're going to be ranking all 67 hyperchargers in the game right now, from the very worst all the way up to the very best. So we've probably had about 3 batches since I've put them all on a tier list. There's also been so many balance changes, especially with the recent ones a couple of days ago. So I'm going to put them in a tier list for you guys, and we're just going to go one by one, going through every single one. So before we jump into it, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. There's over like 60% of you guys that aren't subscribed. Without further ado, let's jump into it. So the F tier, we're going to be starting off here. You will see it on the screen at all times because we're just going to be flying through them, because you guys would have just heard most of these anyway. So first off, we've got Pearl. Pearl's hypercharge. It does take a while to charge up, and it's just really not that great. You already know the gist with it. You don't even get any damage with the hypercharge super. Jean's hypercharge super as well. Most of the time, you don't want to actually pull 2 enemies towards you. Most of the time, it's not really beneficial. It's absolutely terrible. It's only good for the stat boost. Next, we've got Nanny's hypercharge. So although sometimes it can be pretty good to one-shot those squishy brawlers, still you're not going to get much value out of it, because with Nanny, you're always just using your hypercharge duration just sitting there in your Nanny peep, so you can't actually use stat boost in terms of dealing damage. Next, we've got Miko. So Miko's is actually okay. It's more so the fact it takes a while to, go through his hypercharge, and then even sometimes, like, you're in your hypercharge super, and then that enemy you're going for dies, well, you've completely wasted that hypercharge super, so it's just not that beneficial. And then lastly, in the F tier, we have Sprout's hypercharge. So this is only good on the high safe, but Sprout is absolutely terrible in heists. The hypercharge super itself is just beyond awful. It has to be one of the worst in the game. Okay, so now we're going to be going through our D tier hypercharges. A lot of these either just take too long to charge up, or just mechanically they just don't really make any sense, and they've dropped off in terms of the power creep. So first off, we've got Em's hypercharge. So Em's hypercharge got a healthy buff in terms of hypercharge rate last update, which she definitely needed, but the hypercharge itself just isn't that great. I haven't had too much time to test her out. Maybe she's an improver here on the list, but I just don't think it's really going to impact her in the meta too much. Next up, El Primo. So again, he's going to be able to farm his hypercharge a lot through the tank trait, but the hypercharge itself is only good for the stat boost. The actual hypercharge super is just terrible. Next, we've got Charlie. So Charlie's might actually be bumped up 1 tier because she got a super charge rate buff, so she can cycle through hypercharge a lot more effectively. The hypercharge super itself is terrible, but at least it's good against those single shot brawlers, and it's going to waste a lot of ammo. Next, we've got Brock. So again, only good because of the stat boost. The hypercharge super itself isn't really that beneficial, and it should probably get another buff, to be honest, because most players, they actually pop the normal Brock super and then pop hypercharge after it, so they get the stat boost on the normal super. Next, we've got Angelo's hypercharge. So Angelo's hypercharge is pretty good. It takes so long to charge though, and still the hypercharge can just be wasted if the opponents just simply run away. So yeah, it's only really good to gain a lot of pressure. Fang's hypercharge, of course, mechanically is busted, but it's nowhere near as good as it was like over a year ago now. The hypercharge rate, it takes forever, and you're hardly ever going to get one of these, even if you play a perfect Fang game. Next, we've got Daryl's hypercharge. So again, the hypercharge super is terrible. The stat boosts are pretty good, and you automatically charge his hypercharge, so pretty good. Next, we've got Lola's. So Lola's hypercharge, again, it's not going to get the most value. It takes a long time to charge up, and for the most part, it's just going to get destroyed pretty quickly, and the shield gadget doesn't actually work out on this Lola hypercharge, so I don't really like it too much. Next, we've got Colt's hypercharge. So with his, I just don't think the hypercharge super is that great. He's kind of fallen off in a heist meta. He doesn't really do that much now with his hypercharge. There's just better hypercharges out there. Same goes with Shelly as well. So the first batch of hypercharges were just bigger hypercharge supers, and she's fallen off a lot because of this. It doesn't really help her out in a 1 versus 1. And then lastly, we're going to go with Ruff. So Ruff's hypercharge super, it seems really good. It gives a free hypercharge, but it's just really awkward, and for the most part, players already have the hypercharge charge when you throw them that hypercharge super, so it just doesn't really make sense to me. So now we're going to be moving on to the C tier hypercharges. So starting off with Grom. Grom's hypercharge, it's good against bad players, but against good players, you're never really going to get it. And I still don't think the hypercharge super itself is really that good, just because of how vulnerable Grom is on his own. So if you're a casual player, you're probably going to think this hypercharge is like A tier. If you're a pro player, you probably think this hypercharge is like F tier. So I put it in the middle. Next up, we've got 8-bit's hypercharge. So the 8-bit hyper turret, it's just really awkward. You want to throw it out in the open if you want to get actual value out of it, which just doesn't really make sense to me. The hypercharge didn't really make 8-bit any more meta. Gale's hypercharge as well received some big nerfs in the past. It takes forever to charge, and you can't cycle it the way you used to. Otis's hypercharge, it just takes too long to charge for the most part, and it's just a better Otis super. I mean, most of the time you're going to guarantee a kill even when you super someone with Otis. Tick's hypercharge as well, I just think Tick's head is too squishy most times, so it's not even going to hit opponents that have eyeballs. Squeak's hypercharge, I think it's a little bit better than and I give it credit for. You can get some good damage with it. But for the most part, you're going to miss at least one of those Squeak Supers. Spike's Hypercharge is only really good because Spike just deals some consistent damage, so you end up cycling quite a few of them, but it's not really the flashiest. Rose's Hypercharge as well is really good because you can slow opponents, get them closer towards you, and just destroy them. Poker's Hypercharge as well, I feel like I underrated a little bit. The only reason why it's C tier though is because it charges with 2 supers, so you can actually cycle like 3, 4, 5 of these in a game with Poco, so it can be pretty effective for that reason. Meg's Hypercharge was actually going to be around the A tier just because of how fast it charges, but the Hypercharge super itself isn't the greatest. It's just because she's got a fast charge and Hypercharge, the amount of damage that she deals. Jessie's as well is kind of falling off as well, probably low-key D tier. It's only just a bigger Jessie turret with more HP and a little bit more damage. It's only really in a C tier because it charges quite fast. And Jackie as well, only good because she's good at noob stomping with this Hypercharge, and it charges through the tank trait. The slowing Hypercharge can be pretty good to confirm kills, but other than that, it's not really used in pro play. Balls as well, it's only really good to make those Pika plays. Outside of that, not really that useful. Buster's Hypercharge, I feel like actually gets a lot of hate, and I like it for the reason because you can get a free Buster Hypercharge in knockout through literally sitting with you and your teammates every single round. So it's effective for that reason and the stat boost, but the Hypercharge super itself isn't really that good. Same goes with Bo as well. You can charge this quite quickly now with only 2.2 supers. But I think the 5 mines aren't actually that good. I think for the casuals though, this is probably a broken Hypercharge, but for the pros, it's not actually that good. I've not seen Bo too much in meta. And the same goes for Cole. His Hypercharge only takes 2 supers to get, so for that reason, it's actually pretty useful because of the stat boost, but Hypercharge super itself is terrible. It's so bad, but because it charges so quickly, I think I've got to put it in the C tier. So now we're going to be moving on to your B tier Hypercharges. So most of these you probably want to end up buying with coins, especially if your favorite brawler is on this list. You may as well do it. So Hank's Hypercharge is going to go on the B tier. So I thought they literally killed this. I was prepared to put this nearly towards the F tier, and then I tried it out a little bit more, and you still hit a couple of torpedoes with this Hypercharge now. It's just not you're going to hit all 6 of those torpedoes in overtime. I don't really recommend using this in a complete open now, but because it charges quite quickly, like a little bit above 2 supers and plus the tank trait, you're going to get some really good stat boost with this. The speed boost is really going to help a brawler like Hank, so I think B tier is fair, maybe even an A tier low-key. Next we've got Cordelia's Hypercharge, so I wanted to put this in the C tier, but the Hypercharge super does confirm kills really easily. I just don't like the fact that when you're in the Shadow Realm with Cordelia's, you don't actually charge your Hypercharge, if you get what I mean, or your supercharge, so it takes a while to get this in my opinion. Next, Maisie's Hypercharge is really effective. You can get a guaranteed kill with it, maybe even team wipes against tanks, but because it's Maisie and because it's pretty hard to charge against competent players, I think B tier is fair. Eve's Hypercharge is next, so the Hypercharge super is really effective, and she was pretty meta like A tier when this first released because it could get you so much pressure, but I just think there's still too many counters to Eve, and against good players it's hard to build up this Hypercharge. Crow's Hypercharge is next, so outside of Heist this is absolutely terrible and insanely overrated by the casual player, but in Heist it can deal 50% to your Heist save, absolutely insane, so for that reason alone B tier at least. Next we've got BB, so again against noobs I just destroy people with BB's Hypercharge. It's so effective. It's just because pros know how to pinch BB and she never really charges there, so for the pro players it probably would be a little bit lower, but I think B tier is pretty fair because you can get some disgusting team wipes with it. Bell's Hypercharge in the B tier, I know all it does is that it curves onto the player and locks onto them, but at least it's a guaranteed super hit, and the stat boosts on top of this are pretty nice, and you can cycle through a couple of them, especially with Bell because you deal such consistent damage. B's Hypercharge is next, and I will say it does take a little while to charge this one, a little bit more than I anticipated, but it's really nice. The damage boost on top of it is insane. You're guaranteed to slow people across the map with this, so really good. Penny's Hypercharge recently got a nerf, but it's still a really effective one because it can shoot out multiple cannons and it can get a lot of aerial denial. And then Barley's Hypercharge in B tier as well. It takes a long time to charge it, but it's literally guaranteed control and guaranteed kills. So now we're going to be moving on to the A tier Hypercharges, starting off with Tara's Hypercharge. So this secretly got a Hypercharge rate buff with her recent balance change, just taking 1 less card, so the Hypercharge super itself is really good. It can confirm multiple kills, really like it. Surge's Hypercharge as well, I low-key think this might be a B tier Hypercharge now. It just takes a while to charge up. Maybe it's because Surge as a brawler just isn't the best right now in the meta, but it still can confirm you some good kills if timed correctly. Sandy's Hypercharge as well, it just guarantees you complete map control. It cycles okay, and the speed boost is just insane for 10 seconds in that sandy sandstorm. It's just really good. Sam's Hypercharge, I'm kind of on the fence about this. Fundamentally, it is probably the best hypercharge in the game if we're talking pure hypercharge super, but because they nerfed it and it's a very long charge rate now, I don't know whether you're going to get it much in the game, so stand by for that one. I'm placing it in A tier. Maybe it might fall down a little bit though, in my opinion. Next we've got Rico's hypercharge as well, so fundamentally this was like S tier. It received a nerf not too long ago, so I think it toned it down definitely a little bit more, but still a good Rico can pop off on the right map with it. Can low-key be S tier on the right map. Piper's hypercharge as well can always be good because it gives you a really good stat boost. It can break open the map. You can make some really good plays with it. Nita's hypercharge only takes 2 supers to get. That's the reason why it's so good. It just wastes so much opponent's ammo. Dynamite's hypercharge as well is really good because it can confirm you so many kills with the damage boost you get on top of the demolition. Leon's hypercharge does take a while to get, but on a really open map, this is just so good, and you can just guarantee multiple kills with it. Edgar's hypercharge used to be so broken, but I just don't think it's as good as it used to be. Hypercharge is pretty fast charging, and it can guarantee you so many different team wipes. It can get 25% onto the high safe, so for that reason, absolutely A tier. Buzz's hypercharge as well automatically charges, and with his star power, he can just cycle through hypercharges like crazy. You can guarantee a kill every single time with this, so absolutely A tier. With Berry's hypercharge, I think this is a little bit weaker than before because the healing is just not as good as it used to be, but you can cycle this quite effectively, especially in the right composition. Low-key could be S tier. Graze as well, low-key could be S tier, just because, especially with the recent gadget rework, you're able to cycle through supers more effectively, so you can cycle more hypercharges more effectively. This can be really good, especially in hot zone, knockout, etc. And then lastly, we have Ash. So Ash only takes 2 supers to get his hypercharge super. The biggest downside is that he hasn't got the tank trait, so he can't charge this automatically, but a good Ash player can absolutely dominate, especially against some of his harder matchups because of his hypercharge. Now we're going to be moving on to the S tier hypercharges. So starting off with Mortis. So Mortis's hypercharge rate got a slight nerf, but it's still not really impacted him too much. He's still able to just win the game with purple button. It's absolutely insane, especially with the mythic gear. Melody's hypercharge as well got a big hypercharge rate nerf. I thought it would have impacted a lot more, but good Melody players, it seems like they're still taking really good advantage. You know, me myself, I can't be included in that list, but the hypercharge is still insane. Same goes with Lou as well, so his supercharge rate did get nerfed, so that means he gets less hypercharges, but the hypercharge itself is just a confirmed kill every single time. Chester's as well is a confirmed kill, and you can cycle his hypercharge so easily. It can do upwards of like 10k damage, so you can one-shot so many different brawlers inside of the game. Even with the hypercharge rate nerf that he received, I still think it's an S tier one. Max as well, the hypercharge is the reason why she's still so good in pro play. You and your teammates just sit in the same spot, hypercharge 75% of everybody's super, and you could just take over the game. You get a speed boost for a longer duration as well, so good. Mandy's hypercharge was the one that I thought, why didn't this get nerfed for the last set of balance changes? Because you can cycle this with 2.5 supers, and it's just 3 team wipes. The damage boost on top of this is insane. You can one-shot so many brawlers. Yeah, it's a really good hypercharge. I definitely underrated it. I'll hold my hands up, okay? Can't get everything right. This one definitely slipped through my fingers. Next up, we've got Stu's hypercharge. So this didn't receive a nerf as well, and I'm really surprised because you can cycle through 2, maybe 3 in a game, and with the Gasser Hill star power, you can just obliterate anybody you want to. Same goes with Frank as well. This got a big hypercharge rate nerf, but I just think because of the tank trait with Frank, is the tankiest brawler in the game, and compare it with any healer, you're still going to cycle through multiple hypercharges in the game, and you're just able to just get so many stuns easily. Next up, we've got Janet. So I think Janet's is the second best hypercharge in the game, even since the hypercharge rate nerf. Every single hypercharge super is a guaranteed kill, and literally you can't avoid it because she's in the air. And then by the time she lands, she's probably got another super nearly available. It's absolutely busted in pro play. And then finally, we have Mr. P's hypercharge. So I believe this still probably is the best hypercharge in the game, even with a couple of nerfs. I don't think they did enough. They didn't even touch the hypercharge rate, which is bizarre. And the hypercharge does take a little while to actually build up in terms of bounty and knockout, but everywhere else, especially against tanks, you can cycle through to them easily, and as soon as you get it, it's a pretty much automatic win. So I still think the hypercharge is worthwhile getting. So I'm going to put the full list on the screen right here. Let me know whether I've got any of these wrong. Again, I'm just kind of whirling through these because a lot of these haven't changed too much, but then there's a lot of new ones and a lot of balance changes that have happened, so some of them might be surprising. I think this is pretty accurate. You can give or take maybe 1 rank on a few of these, for example, but in terms of overall hypercharge rate, in terms of how good they are when you use it, does it confirm kills, does it confirm you know, many kills. The ones that confirm many kills are probably ones you want to put at the top of the S tier, but charge pretty quickly as well. You know, there's no point like a Fang hypercharge, for example. If you're never going to charge it in the game, then it's not a good hypercharge. So that's going to be it, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.